Shabazz is a perfect example of such fulfilled reader. I'll quickly read from our Get Started manual who a fulfilled reader is, so that we'll just kind of refresh our memory. It says a fulfilled reader is someone who reads because of their love and passion for books. So they don't see reading as a burden. They have a why for reading, to satisfy career, learning goals, to read widely for leisure and whatever. So for reading, and they do all they can to achieve this why. They read to become better and empowered through reading, and they go on to positively impact and influence others and societies based on the insights they have acquired from their reading. So Brother Shabazz is that perfect example. He reads a lot of books. The books he read, when I went through his collections, and some titles we discussed, and I see some titles, and I was kind of surprised at the depth he goes to get books. You know, the books and the titles he have read are so wide, and it's so very amazing. And he's somebody who does not see reading as a burden. He sees reading as a hobby, as something that helps him achieve his goals. His goal, basically, like I said before, is for to liberate the African continent, to see that the continent thrives, and Black nationalism. So he's very interested in that area of Black nationalism, and he's committed to it. He has spent a lot of years trying to move around US prisons and see that Blacks are given fair justice, fair hearing, and a lot of his tweets. If you follow him on Twitter, you will see that he's concerned about actions that tend to. He's concerned about actions that tend to create injustice or injure the black man. Let me use that word, and I think I commend him for that. It's one that is top notch from him. So please just bear with me a little bit, and while we wait for Brother Shabazz to kindly join us. Some of the issues we'll be talking about today is going to tell us how he became acquainted with reading, and he's going to tell us what his motivating factors are towards reading. As we all know, reading is not an easy task, actually, and it's not passive. Reading is not passive. Reading is actually an active activity. So he's always committed. Each time, each day, maybe perhaps in a couple of 1 or 2 days, you see him talk about a new book, and you see him highlight and do a lot of commentary, and you see him apply what he's reading from the books along with his current domain. So he's going to tell us what his motivating factors are. And we'll also get to know at what age he started, and we'll be pleased also to listen to him tell us about his engagement with the Black nationalist movement, how far the journey has come, where he started from, and what he has achieved so far, and the challenges he faces, and what he thinks actually the African continent needs to liberate ourselves. You know, there's so much words about Africa being a very rich continent, but we have not been able to utilize that. So Brother Shabazz is online now, so let me just admit him and then we'll commence. Brother Shabazz, good to have you. Good afternoon from my location. Can you hear me? Yes, Brother Shabazz, you're welcome. I'm sorry, Brother Shabazz, we can't hear you currently. We are unable to hear you. Please, is there somebody else that can hear Brother Shabazz? You just let me know so that I know that it's not from my end. Olayinka.
We can't hear him.
Okay, you can't hear him, see? Okay. So Brother Shabazz, we'll just wait for you to try to check your audio. Hello, Brother Shabazz. Yeah, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. You're welcome.
Okay, sorry about that. I have some technical difficulties.
Okay. So
I
good
just
to have
my
you.
phone. So let me see here. All right.
Yeah. So you're welcome. You're welcome to the ReadbookNG community. We are a community of fulfilled readers. We make efforts to read each day and to ensure that we, through our reading, be able to improve ourselves and also create positive influence in our society. So I was just sharing with the community a little bit about you. Like we know, you were born and raised in Los Angeles, and you say your adopted country is Ghana, West Africa. So we are glad to have you speak with your brothers and sisters back home in West Africa. So thank you very much for accepting.
Yeah, sad to say, I've only been to I've been as far as, well, I've been to about, let's see, I think 9 West African countries, and I've been to Porto Novo, which is right at the border of Nigeria and Benin. But I've yet to make it to Nigeria.
Okay, very good. Okay, sometime we expect to have you in Nigeria, and then it will be a great honor to have you in our community, and we'll meet, and then we'll have a great time.
Sounds good. Look forward to it.
Yeah. So Brother Shabazz is a Harvard-trained anthropologist, like I shared with them, and since 2010, he has been involved in teaching sociology in several U.S. prisons. He's Pan-African, and he's a champion of Black nationalism and social justice. So I see that a lot. I see you do that a lot on Twitter, and I'm very grateful for your effort at liberating the Black race. So thank you very much. Yeah, so Brother Shabazz, we are grateful to have you again, and we always want to talk with fulfilled readers. Fulfilled readers are individuals who, through their reading, are able to transfer the knowledge you get into their current domain to create impact. So we are glad to have you do that always. So today we'll just discuss so that members of our community will be able to get 1 or 2 insights from you. And then as a community of fulfilled readers, we will be able to go on and do more. Yeah, thank you very much. You know,
would you mind if I wanted to share a few slides and maybe to get the conversation going. Would that be okay?
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to hand over to you right now, and then you take charge. And at some point, when you want to have questions from our community members, you just let us know, and then we'll do that. We'll take questions in addition to what you'll be handling or discussing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In fact, the Q&A, the questions will be what I'm really interested in. I'll take about 10 minutes for the slides, and then we can have a discussion.
Thank you very much. So over to you right now.
All right.
Okay.
Let me figure this out. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to share the screen.
Okay.
How do I share the screen? I don't see any. Let's see.
Okay, sorry. Let me enhance that. Yeah, you can try it again. Try again. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Share screen.
Is that possible?
Yeah, there should be a. I don't see the option.
Yeah. You are using.
Oh, I see it now. I got it. Okay, here we go.
Okay, great.
Share screen. Share documents screen. Okay. Start now. Allow. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Not yet for my hand. Not yet. Okay, yeah, I can see that right now.
Okay, all right, now. What about now?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
You can see my slides?
Yeah, we can see that, yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. So now my first impression or memory of a book was actually a fish. And this fish is called the coelacanth. And they call it a living fossil. And they call it a living fossil because scientists thought the fish was extinct for 65 million years. And then they discovered one off the coast of South Africa in 1937 or so. And so as a child, I was about 7 years old when I read about this fish in a book, maybe 7 years old. And so that phenomena really stuck with me. This fish that they thought was gone were extinct for 65 million years, and they discovered it again in South Africa. And the other thing about the fish is it has the fish has lobed fins. The fins are sort of fleshy, and what it does is it's the fins, the adaptation of the fins is sort of a transition from living in the water to living on land. And so this fish is important for understanding what that process was like. And so that's my earliest remembrance of reading a book and specific detail about a book. And then when I was about, I would think, let's see, I was in the 3rd grade, I guess. So I was about 10 or so. I was introduced to The Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. And that was in the 10th grade. And The Lord of the Rings, basically this epic tale of, bad versus evil versus good. And another key part of the story is sort of how these little people triumph over this big evil. And so that left a big impression and made me curious about fantasy and things like that. And so that was another big impression when I was about 10 years old. I read The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, a classic book in the Western world anyway. Now, fast forward to a few years out of high school, I enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. And it turned out that I was in boot camp right when the Iraq conflict broke out in the 90s. And it turns out that well, let me say this too. For our Nigerian family, you may not know this, but there are many people in the U.S. who are poor. And I grew up very poor. In fact, we could not have survived growing up without, assistance from the government. And so some African Americans, some Latinos, or I would say many of us, joined the military as an economic option. because there's no opportunities out in the world. And I was one of those persons. And so I wasn't joining to be patriotic and fight, fight the white man's wars. I was trying to find a way economically to do what I wanted to do. And so at any rate, I was in the Marine Corps in boot camp, and they have these contests. And if you win the contest, you get a promotion. And if you get promoted and you win the contest, it was a way of not being deployed to the war front in Iraq. And so they told me, if you win these contests, we won't send you to Iraq. And so I said, no problem, I'm going to win these contests. And so what I had to do was to memorize this book. Back then it was called the Basic Skills Training Book. And basically I memorized this big book as a way of beating the system which would have sent me to some sort of combat zone and fighting a war I didn't want to be involved in. It wasn't my war to fight. And so this book was very important to me in terms of avoiding fighting, the wars of elite whites in some foreign land. And so that was called the Basic Skills Training Book in the Marine Corps. So that was that book was very important in my development. And then after I got out of the Marine Corps, well, I should say too that it was in the Marine Corps that I developed a love of reading. And the reason for that is I met a brother who was a Muslim, African American, and also a Jamaican American who was a Rastafarian. And so they started me to reading these Afrocentric books and books on Pan-Africanism, and that started my sort of commitment to African unity. And they also encouraged me to start a study group. So I founded a study group, pretty much like what you guys are doing now, a reading group in the Marine Corps in Japan, called the African American Historical Society the African American Historical Society. And so that got me on the path towards, Pan-Africanism, Black consciousness, etc. And so I got out of the Marine Corps, and I had this new sort of consciousness. And then my first job out of the military is in a bookstore. And this is the bookstore where I worked, SO1 Books, in Los Angeles. And these are my bosses, James and Thomas. Now, I also, once I was out of the military, and I'm reading Malcolm X now and other books, and Malcolm X asked a fundamental question. He asked us being African Americans, who were we? What was our name? What religion did we have? What was our identity, basically, before the white man stole us from Africa? So these questions about identity that I didn't understand or didn't know the answers to, Malcolm X really set the fire in me to understand more about my identity and more about the African American connection to Africa. And so that idea about connection sort of primed me to be curious about how things are linked up. And so because of that, I used to stare at this book in my classroom at Compton College, where I enrolled after the Marine Corps. There was a book in this bookshelf in front, where I sat in the front row, and there's a bookshelf sitting next next to the instructor. And it was this one book always caught my eye by Einstein about the unified field theory. And so Einstein was trying to unite electromagnetism theory electromagnetic theory and magnetism, and trying to bring these two theories together. And so this idea of unity was just really compelling my thinking at the time. And so this book caught my eye also. And so I was really primed to think about, what connects things, how are we connected, especially, how African Americans are connected to Africa, but also the big question about how the world is connected, how humans are connected to each other, and what's our connection to nature, et cetera, et cetera. So that was another influential book that has always stuck in my head. And of course, Malcolm X himself was very influential. As is the case for many African Americans, the autobiography of Malcolm X had a huge influence on my life and my thinking about the world. One part of it is sort of this man who was in prison and sort of remade himself into this radical, revolutionary, Pan-Africanist Black nationalist. And another part of it really is just the idea of of questioning America and our assumptions about what America is. You know, we think of, many of us learned that America is this great place where freedom and democracy reign. And Malcolm X had a different vision, a different perspective. You know, in fact, his perspective was opposite. America's anti-democratic. America's anti-freedom. America's oppressive. And it does this on a global scale. And so that really sort of transformed how I see myself and how I think about my politics and how I see the land of my birth, the United States. And this is a few images of Malcolm X in Nigeria. He traveled to Nigeria twice, once in 1959 as a representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in the Nation of Islam. And then when he broke with the nation in '63, he traveled to Nigeria again in 1964. And so these are two images for him, of him in Nigeria. Now, I wanted to stop here and say that, or to say or ask for your readers or your listeners, if you can tell me, just type into the comment section, tell me the Nigerian or the Yoruba name that Malcolm X was given, and I'm going to send out 2 books to 2 winners in Nigeria. So in the comments, just write, tell me Malcolm X's Yoruba name that he was given in Ibadan, and the first 2 who get the answer right, I'm going to send 2 books, 2 books your way. So this is Malcolm X in Nigeria. And this is another Pan-Africanist from Nigeria who was a friend of Malcolm X's and many others, Babatunde Olatunji. He was a drummer who immigrated to the United States in the 60s and became involved in the civil rights movement. And this is his wife talking here, or quoting, talking about his commitment to Pan-Africanism and uniting African Americans and Africans. And this is my library card from the University of Ghana. And so after getting out of the Marine Corps and going back to school, I took my first trip to Ghana in 1997. And this is my library card from the University of Ghana back in '97. I wore that card out. I was in the library every day looking up stuff, you know, reading about Ghana and Ghanaian history, etc. And this is a Nigerian American writer, Tomi Adeyemi, and she wrote a book recently. It's a book called Children of Blood and Bone. It's a sort of fantasy book that blends Oyo Yoruba culture and fantasy. And what I thought was compelling about it were a few things, but one thing was about her dedication was actually to Black Lives Matter. So she's connecting a story about the Oyo and Oyo Yoruba history and culture and magic, and she connected that to the struggle of African Americans in the United States. So I thought that was really compelling, the way that she made those connections. And she also says too, she said she was inspired to write these type of books because she didn't see her image in, that is to say, the image of African people in the books she read. And so she decided she would do something about it, and she did. She's been very successful as a writer of books, and she also has a movie contract based upon this same book. And then the last slide is just something that I think really reflects my thinking, and I think the thinking of lots of book lovers, is just that, you know, book reading is really about curiosity. And like Malcolm, if I had the luxury of just sitting around and reading all day, I would do that. I would go to some village in Nigeria or Ghana and just read all day. But, you know, we got to live, we got to struggle, we got to fight to make Africa united and productive and free. And so we don't have the time to read all day, but we do have the time we have to make time to read, to better ourselves and understand our condition, and inspire us to do things, or inspire us to change our condition. All right. And that's the conclusion of the slides. Let me see here. Okay, are you there?
Yeah, we are there with you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. We are grateful. Great story, great history. I saw your library card and I was like, can I still remember where my library card is? I don't think I can remember. Okay, thank you very much. We are grateful for your...
Oh, someone asked about the title of the books. So the books I'm going to give away is one one autobiography of Malcolm X, and then the other is a book about Black love. And so I'll be sending those out to the lucky winners.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for the gift. I guess you will check the comment section and you will find out who the winners are. So, Brother Shabazz, thank you. Are you done with your presentation?
Yes.
So now we are going to go into question narrative session. Please, can we unmute Mike? Yeah, I think our baby reader. That's our baby reader. So that's a
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just going to ask the first question. I think this is a different question from what we actually discussed. But Brother Shabazz, I saw your tweet about your daughter going with you to the book to the store, and she actually went straight to pick a book. So how did that happen? Like, how do you show this example to your little one so that they can appreciate reading? How can parents do that?
Well, you know, it's a challenge, you know, especially in the U.S. As Tommy said in that slide I showed you, we don't often see our images in the media, in books and movies, etc. And so you really have to, as a parent, you have to really be careful and conscious and intentional in terms of encouraging your child not only to read, but not just to read anything, because if they just read randomly, they're going to read a lot of white images, you know, European images, Western images. They won't see their reflection. And so you have to do two things. You have to encourage your child to read by modeling. My child is always talk about, you know, she's only 5, but she's talking about giving papers and talking to her professor, and she doesn't know what a professor is, but she hears us say it. And so part of it is, you know, modeling what you want your child to do. If your child sees you reading and writing all the time, they're going to mimic that too. They're going to do the same thing you do.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I think is really being conscious of what they read. Now, the other challenge too is that a lot of our interaction with information now is on the internet. So that's a whole nother challenge, because the internet's the same thing. If you don't manage if you don't supervise what they watch, a lot of it will be, it's not even that the African image is invisible, it's the African image is negative. And so you'll learn, if you don't supervise, your child will learn to not like their image. So that's the basic thing, is just really being encouraging, modeling, and really being purposeful about what they read. And they, you know, children are like sponges. They're going to do what you do, and so it's really not that difficult actually. If you model it, they're going to follow and imitate what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great answer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just as we go on, I'd like to tell our fellow participants, if you have any question, just drop it in the chat session and I'll see that, and Brother Shabazz will do justice to that. So as we continue, Brother Shabazz, how did you become acquainted with reading widely? You know, I saw your timeline and your book collection, the genre of books you read are so wide, so varied. You know, I was telling the participant before you came in, I said, there are books you've read even in Benin. I'm from Benin City, and there are some books, some books I've not even got to know about. But when I saw it on your timeline, I was like, wow, you've read books about Benin, about the people, the city of Benin, and the back, those days before the white men came, how they live, and I was so intrigued. So how did you become acquainted with reading? Not just reading widely.
Yeah, well, yeah, it really starts, I would say, well, I was always curious about things. My mom told me a story once, and she's passed now, but she used to tell me a story about a teacher when I was in I think the 3rd grade, and there was some sort of lesson in the class that I didn't get it in class, and I spent all night trying to figure out that problem. I wouldn't go to sleep. She tried to put me to sleep. She'd come back at 10 o'clock, and I was up trying to figure out this problem. And so I was just always very tenacious and curious about things, and that was part of it. And then I would say too, just someone, a teacher took an interest in me, and they gave me that book, the Lord of the Rings, and so that really sort of opened up my ideas about creativity and imagining things and seeing a world that's not right immediately in front of you. And so that was also important. So part of it is, I think, mentoring, having someone to encourage you, that's really helpful. And then finally, I think what really sort of sparked me was Malcolm X. Malcolm X asking that question: what is our relationship to Africa? What is our identity? You may think you know who you are, but you don't really know who you are. And to understand who you are, you got to read about, Benin in Nigeria. You have to read about the Wolof. You have to read about slavery. Most importantly, for Malcolm, our history didn't start with slavery. Our history started in Africa. And so to understand who the African American is, we have to have a better understanding of who Nigerians are. And even before there was a Nigeria, who the Yoruba are, or who the Yotibali are, or who the Hausa are. You have to understand, or the Mandinka. You have to understand that, because that's an important part of your identity. And I would also add that, for Nigerians, Nigerians have to do the same thing. They have to know more about Brazil, because Brazil played an important role in the development of Lagos. And most Nigerians don't know that. Most Brazilians don't. You don't know it if you haven't read about it, you wouldn't know about it. And so the same thing on the African side of the equation, Africans have to learn more about the diaspora. And so that curiosity, that drive to know about myself, and that connection really was the fire, the spark, and read a lot. And so that's really what it was. So this Pan-African question really was the driver for me reading and collecting books and desiring to learn more about my identity, and more about Africa and the African diaspora.
Okay, thank you very much. Great answer. Wow, I think somebody in the comment section, Blessing, she's saying, wow, I think that's very inspiring. That's very inspiring, Brother Shabazz. And we are grateful to have you this very beautiful day to discuss all this with us. Okay, the next question I'll ask is one that concerns our vision as a community. I mentioned earlier, I said, as a community, we want to become fulfilled readers. Fulfilled readers for us are people who loves to read, and they are well interested in books. And they're also people who become better and empowered through their reading. And lastly, they go on to positively impact and influence others and the society. So, Brother Shabazz, how do you try to use the insight, the knowledge you get from book? How do you tailor it to
You're breaking up. You're breaking up.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So, like I was saying, I was trying to define who a fulfilled reader is. And my question, I said, a fulfilled reader is somebody who they can get from what they read, they get ideas, knowledge, and then they transfer it to their domain, like to create impact for the society. And I see you do that very well. You take from the books you read, you pursue a cause that is so great and has very magnificent impact on the continent of Africa. So how can you advise us as readers? How do we tailor what we read to our pursuits, to make the society better and to make ourselves better? How can we draw that connection? Yeah.
Well, I think I would put it maybe a bit differently. It's really about figuring out for me anyway, figuring out what's your passion? What really drives your curiosity? What keeps you up at night? What are your talents? And then once you figure out those things, that should inform what you read. And then it's a matter of, because we all have different talents, we don't all have the same talents. We're all, diverse in that way. Some of us are good at building things. I can't hammer a nail straight. It's terrible. That's not my skill. Other people are really good at that. Some of us are builders. Some of us have a knack for creating things. Some of us are really organized. Some of us are good at supervising. Some of us aren't. And so you have to really figure out what is your talents, and then what are you passionate about, and then start reading based upon that thing that you are passionate about, and then apply that, figure out how you can use that talent that has been now informed by your reading to enhance that talent, and then figure out how to use that talent to build, to support and build a better Nigeria. So I think it really starts with basically sort of figuring out how you can use your talents to improve your community, and then to improve your city, to improve Nigeria, to improve Africa. And that's how I would approach it. So this really started with what your passion is in reading on that level, and then you're going to connect dots also, right? So when I'm reading Malcolm X and these questions about unity, that led me to Albert Einstein. And then that led me to quantum mechanics and understanding, the properties of subatomic particles as an important way or another way of understanding how things are connected. And so once you start that path, it's going to connect you to other things, and that's going to connect you to other things, and that's going to make you a more dynamic reader and learner.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, there's something I took out, and I want to hope that every reader would have identified that. He said, once you start with your interest, it's going to connect you to something else, and then it's going to make you a more dynamic reader. That's great. Thank you very much. Now, there's a question from Blessing. I'm going to ask this. Blessing says, so did you pick the books you read solely based on your curiosity and wanting to know where you're from?
I didn't hear the last part. What about, you said something about from?
Yeah, he said, did you pick the books you read solely based on your curiosity and wanting to know where you're from?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah. In fact, I'll give an example. There's a book here. Let me see if I can find it right quick. Now, one advantage that I have, well, I don't know if it's an advantage, but in the U.S. they have a vibrant used book market. Now, I've seen some of that in Ghana. You might have a guy on a street somewhere in Ghana, and they have they have some sidewalk, and they spread their books out on the sidewalk, and they sell the books right there on the side. They sell the books right there, and so you have some of that in Ghana, but in the U.S. you have used bookstores everywhere, and so a lot of my books are from used bookstores. A few things I order online. And it was a book just last week I saw. Well, I can't find it right now. Well, anyway, it's a biography or memoir of a journalist here in the U.S. his name is Mike Wallace. Now, I don't care about Mike Wallace really, but I do know that Mike Wallace had a relationship with Malcolm X. And so I wanted to know, I wanted to get some information about, it added to my knowledge of Malcolm X by getting this book on Mike Wallace and knowing that in that book, there will be something about Malcolm X. And sure enough, when I got the book, you looked in the index, Malcolm X was there. And so, so all the books are somehow all of my books are somehow connected to my curiosity about Africa, about African Americans, about Black people in Brazil, Black people in Canada, Black people globally. And that's pretty much not everything, but I would say 90% of it is about is somehow connected to that question.
Okay, thank you very much. Great response. Now we are going to dive into this. I think this is the end point, the end result of reading. So, Brother Shabazz, can you just tell us briefly in your terms, what are the benefits of reading?
Wow, there's so many. Well, I think let's see. For me, I think it's important to be informed about the world you live in, and so books is one way that you can be informed. You know, because you're learning not only about your immediate environment, but through books you can learn about faraway places. You know, I've never been to Nigeria, not yet, but I know a fair amount about Nigerian history and about Nigerian culture. And books allows me to do that, you know, without actually being in that physical place. So one part of it is just sort of, it allows you to be knowledgeable about and about the world around you. And I think also books should, I emphasize should, help make you a critical reader. You know, so you have to learn how to be discerning, and not just because it's in the book doesn't make it true. And so you have to learn how to, you know, cross-check references and not just take everything a book says at face value. Does it make sense to you? If not, why not? How can I verify what this person is saying? What might be the agenda of this person for writing this? All those have to be questions too that you bring to bear in the book. And so, you know, so critical thinking is another useful tool that books affords to us. Books are freedom, and in a real, very practical way. You know, for example, many Yoruba and many Igbo were enslaved, and I think some of you all know that, right? And so I probably, some of you all there, and me on this end, we share the same ancestors. Yeah. And so those ancestors were enslaved here in the United States. And on those plantations where those Africans were enslaved, it was illegal to read a book. You could be literally killed for reading books. And people were killed for reading books. Africans on plantations in the United States were killed for reading books. But guess what? They read anyway. They had to read, you know, undercover. They had to read out of the gaze of the white people on the plantation, but they read. Some of them learned to read, and they used that knowledge to challenge their condition. For example, some of them read the Bible, right? Even though it was illegal, they learned to read and they read the Bible. And so whereas white people use the Bible to justify slavery, you know, slaves obey your masters. If someone strikes you, what do? Turn the other cheek. That's in the Bible. But the Bible also says, right, that that the Jews were enslaved in Egypt, and those enslaved people were chosen by God. And there will be a great people because they were chosen by God. And so these Africans enslaved in the U.S. from Nigeria, or what's now Nigeria, the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Hausa, in Ghana, the Asante, the Fanti, the Akwamu, the Wolof in Senegal, all these people now are merged together on these plantations. They're reading the Bible, and they're saying, you know what? Those Hebrews were enslaved. And they're looking around and saying, well, we're enslaved too. And if God chose the Hebrews, right, but they would not have known that if they didn't read. And so they use reading literally to challenge white supremacy. And so reading played a major role in ultimately defeating or breaking the system of slavery in the United States. Black people reading.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Great response as regard the benefits of reading. I love that part you said, reading is freedom. Reading is freedom. I love that part so much. Okay, I'm going to take this question from Mercy Ovo. She says, how was your exploration of Africa? Did you get a cultural shock when you first visited?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, this goes back to the question of the importance of reading too. I read so much, I had a pretty good understanding of what Africa. It was almost for me. Well, actually, for me, it was like coming home. I really felt at home when I landed in Ghana. The first thing I remember was the humidity, because we got there at night and the thick, hot air just really sort of smacked you. And I'm looking up at the sky and the stars. You can see stars. We don't have, Accra doesn't have a lot of light pollution like they have in the United States. But yeah, I felt at home. I feel more at home in Ghana or Senegal or the Gambia or Kenya than I do here in the United States. Now, that's not true for every African American. So if you go to a place, and this is true for any sort of travel, if you go to a place expecting it to be just like the United States and expecting to work like it does the United States, this can be disappointed. So that can be a challenge for some people in the U.S. and certainly for some African Americans.
Yeah.
Even basic things like, African Americans have a particular understanding of race, and Nigerians or Ghanaians aren't going to have that same understanding of race. Their identity is primarily ethnic or national or based on the Latin. Right. So if you come there with an idea about race that is your sort of common sense and use that to navigate Nigeria or Ghana, you're going to be confused. And so you have to read, right? If you read, and not just read, but also talk to people, you'll be better equipped to navigate Ghana and Nigeria. And so, no, the short answer is no. I was not, there was no culture shock for me. I felt really at home, actually. And I looked forward to the day, in fact, when I can leave this shithole in the United States for good and live somewhere in Ghana or Nigeria or somewhere else in Africa.
Wow, that is great. That is great. Would love to have you around. We'd love to have you around. So thanks for that great answer. Now, there's another question from the Bali. It says, Brother Shabazz. Brother Shabazz said he read when he was a little boy. How did others, especially kids around him, thought about his love for books? So, reading in an environment, how was the response from others? How did they, what were their thoughts about you as a reader?
That's a great question, because, here in the U.S., there's an idea that in the U.S., amongst especially poor communities, Black communities, that if you're then you're ostracized from your community, and that's a common sort of belief. And that wasn't my experience. I would say my experience was just more, I was reading so much that I didn't really hang out a lot. And then as I got a little older, I didn't go to clubs. I was always reading. I was always just curious about things. And so reading, in fact, I spent so much of my time reading, I didn't really hang out a lot. And in the U.S., part of the thing too is that as a young Black male in the U.S., the system is set up to ensnare you in the prison industrial complex. That is to say that you're going to get entangled in the policing system. You're going to have squabbles with police. Police are going to be harassing you, but police can't harass you if you're at home reading your books. So I just never had that problem. But I want to stress that the system is set up for you to do that, for you to have these classes with police. But I was able to avoid a lot of that because I was always in a library somewhere at home reading. And so the answer is that it wasn't so much that people had this or that thought about me reading. It was really that I was sort of a loner, and so I just never, it was never a major issue for me. But I guess I really don't know, because I wasn't really hanging out a lot with folks. I was really in a library somewhere in my house reading a lot. So I guess I was, now that I think about it, I guess I was what they call they say yeah, I guess I'd be a nerd or something like that. I read a lot back then. So yeah. So yeah, the short answer is that I never got any negative comments about reading specifically. What I did get a lot of negative comments about was more about my looks. You know, I look, because many of us learn in our society, in the U.S., that being African is bad, that Africa's a backwards place. You know, this is by design, it's white supremacy. Going back to slavery, you know, because on those plantations, again, those Africans were taught to reject their Africanness and embrace a slave identity, right? So many of us have learned that, you know, if you look too African, quote unquote, then you're ugly. And even calling you an African was an insult. And so I got teased a lot in that way, not so much about reading, but really about, you know, about looking African. That was a point of embarrassment, because many of us have learned that to be African is to be backwards, or to be uncivilized, or be less intelligent.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for that response. Now we'll just go into the next that borders readers. This question is about trying how we can get the best out of our reading. It says, how do you boost concentration and comprehension when you read?
Okay, well, let me see. Let me show you this book. Let's see here. Can you see this book?
Not clearly.
Can you see it? Okay.
Yeah. It says OKOG.
Okay. Anyhow, this book is Yurugu by Marimba. Yeah, by Marimba Ani. And it's one of my favorite books. As you can see, if you could see, it's very well. It's worn. It's very worn. I've used it a lot. I've taken it to Ghana with me many times. But what I want to show you is that it's marked up. You know, I have bookmarks all over the book. I highlighted in the book. I've written in the book. And so one part of the answer is how you engage the book. So you have to really treat the book as an artifact of knowledge. And so you're really sort of, it's like talking to a friend. The conversation is really me writing in the book. I don't agree, you know, I'll write in the margins here, you know, I don't agree with that, or this is really interesting, or let's see. Here I wrote, there's a section here about, you know, aggressive Africans. And so it's really like sort of engaging or having a conversation with the book. That's sort of how I focus. And by doing that, by being engaged in that way with the book, right, you can't help but be focused, because you're quote unquote having a conversation by writing notes, by highlighting, etc. So that's how I do it. Now, if it's a library book, let me repeat, if it's a library book, do not write in the book. That drives me crazy. But people do it. But after, you can write a little summary, right? Maybe write 3 or 4 lines about that chapter to jog your memory when you go back to it. And so in all those ways, you're engaging the text, and that's going to keep you focused on what you're reading.
About the non-white gaze. Well, I would say the white gaze in terms of Africans, if that makes sense. So I was referring specifically to people that would consider or call themselves in a specific, category. They might be Asian, they might be, Indians, there might be Arabs that might have been in the continent at one point or whatever. The relationship doesn't matter. The point is, like, they do not feel like, how do you reconcile that, or what do you think of that idea?
Okay, let me make sure I understand your question. If I understand you correctly, you're asking about the non-white gaze in terms of how those people relate to Africans, or
even vice versa.
Yeah, okay. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there, for Chinwezu, the Arab gaze is so strong that we have to leave them out of the Pan-African equation. We have to leave North Africa out of the Pan-African equation, because if we bring in Egypt, if we bring in Tunisia, if we bring in Morocco, if we bring in Libya, right, if we bring in Sudan, because their identity is more Arab than African, they would say that they're Arab before they were African, then you're undermining the Pan-African project. And so Chinwezu says, because of that gaze, because of how they understand or how they relate to Africans, it would be counterproductive to bringing in Arabs into that unity. So that's one point. Another point is that I would say that the one consequence of the gaze is that many of us, whether we're in Nigeria or Ghana or Senegal, South Africa, it doesn't really matter. Many of us, much of our knowledge about the world and even about ourselves has been filtered through white people or through Arabs. And so we're going to have to figure out a way to break the influence of that gaze, so that we can really see ourselves for who we are. For example, Steve Biko in South Africa, he developed something called he was a founder of something called the Black Consciousness Movement. And the whole idea behind the Black Consciousness Movement is that South Africans, and Africans generally, have internalized a worldview, a perspective that is Eurocentric, right? And to break that brainwashing, if you will, we have to be very purposeful about developing a Black consciousness about the world, right? And so that, I guess the point there is that the gaze has been very harmful in even how we see ourselves. So it's not only that Africans, or not only that Arabs and Europeans especially are looking at us a certain way, is that we've internalized that way of looking at ourselves and looking out at the world. And so one really important thing that we do, through our reading, and this is why this book is really important, her project, Marimba Ani's project in Yurugu, is really about breaking that gaze. How do we break that gaze and see ourselves as African people from an African-centered perspective? And so that's one point of critical reading, is to challenge that gaze. And also with China, so China has come into Africa now as sort of an alternative to the West. And so the question is, will China be another example of a foreign gaze that subordinates Africans, that oppresses Africans, that marginalizes Africans in their own spaces? Or will it be an example of a mutually beneficial relationship between two partners? The answer is open. It doesn't look good right now, but it's an open question still. I still think that we have an opportunity, or we have a responsibility to make China-African relations work. But, you know, we're kind of at a disadvantage now because we're operating as, you know, as small nations. You know, I don't know, maybe Ghana's populace is, I don't know, 35 million, whatever it is. And how do you compete as a nation of 35 million against 1 billion? You can't. Have to unite. If you unite, you have 1.2 billion on the continent. You have 1.5 billion globally, total, all African people. Then you can compete. But you can't compete as individual nations. And so that's another aspect of the gaze. And just, I would say lastly, that the gaze, you know, whether you're in India or Japan or United States or Canada, wherever you go, the gaze in terms of how others see us, or also in the Arab world, of course, the gaze is oftentimes negative. And that negativity is rooted in the transatlantic slave trade, or what's called the transatlantic slave trade, and the so-called Arab slave trade. Now, the reason I say so-called is because those really weren't trades at all. Those were actually declarations of war. And African people have been slow to realize, to understand that we are at war. And the very fact that we call that war a trade just shows us how confused we are. And, you know, again, one way to get unconfused is you got to study. You got to study your enemy. You got to study your oppressor. Not to say that everybody, every white person is your enemy, but most Europeans, you know, believe they're superior to Africans. Most Arabs think they're superior to Africans. And so you have to understand that history, understand the culture, the ethics, the strategy, the tactics of your oppressors to win. But the first step is to know you're at war, and you have to develop a war mentality to win. Part of that mentality requires us to unite wherever we are on the planet. African people have to come together to fight this thing. It's our only chance of winning.
Thank you very much, Brother Shabazz, and I want to thank everyone for our time. It's been a very wonderful interaction with you, Brother Shabazz, and sincerely, I would want to appeal that from time to time, as your schedule will permit, we would look forward to such engagements. Okay, I wanted to ask one question as I got something from your last discussion. I want you to tell us briefly or enlighten us on the Pan-African dream. What to you is the Pan-African dream all about?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, the basic idea of Pan-Africanism is that wherever African people are in the world, or people of African descent in the world, they have some sort of shared destiny. They have a shared history. They have common problems that unites them. And so we have to figure out, and so given that we have a shared destiny, how do we figure out in what structure can we work together to accomplish or to realize that destiny and to solve our problems, right? Because Arab intervention and European contact was catastrophic for Africans. It's not to say that Africa was a paradise before Arabs and Europeans came. But what Arabs and Europeans did was fragment us in ways that was compounded, right? Because before they came, you know, we had treaties. There was trans-regional trade. There were confederacy. The people, you know, there were examples of Africans, you know, also working together. But the slave trade, one outcome of it was that We became very distrustful of each other. We became more divided. We have these fragmented borders created by Europeans in the Berlin Conference, 1884 to 1885. And so Pan-Africanism is really about how can we figure out a way, or in what way, by what method, can we as Africans figure out a way to come together and solve these common problems? Now we're doing some of that here. You know, you're in Nigeria, you have a group in Nigeria, you're talking to someone whose ancestors were kidnapped and brought to the United States and enslaved, and we're communicating. That's part of the process of Pan-Africanism, us coming together, sharing, learning from each other, and understanding that united, we're stronger, and divided, we're weak and easily oppressed. But you can't oppress a united, strong people. You can't oppress a united people because they're strong. And so that's the basic idea, is that to a large degree, Europeans and Arabs have divided us over religion, over borders, over, saying the Hutu are better than the Tutsi are better than the Hutu. In all those different ways, we learned that we learn more about division than what unites us. And so that's the basic idea. So the vision really is a United States of Africa, united under oneness, and the African diaspora being aligned with that united entity. Now, for a Nigerian, that sounds crazy, right? So if you're from northern Nigeria, you got Fulani going around, taking farmland from people and killing the villagers, and it's horrible, right? You have Boko Haram, who wants to, create Islamic law for all of Nigeria, impose a radical vision of Islam on all Nigerians. It doesn't seem, how do you go from Boko Haram to a united Africa? It doesn't seem possible. But, impossible things happen all the time. The same process that brainwashed some Nigerians to embrace Boko Haram is not really complicated, right? It's really about poverty and lack of opportunity, right? And if you don't have if you can't find a place to make a decent living, if you can't put food on your table, and your government's not working for you, then you're going to be attracted to things that promise you those things. And so so that was a process, right? In the same way, there can be a process that makes Africans committed to African unity, and that would mean putting the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Hausa, the Fulani, the Ashanti. It means putting Africa before your ethnic identity, putting Africa before your national identity, putting Africa first. And if we all put Africa first, we'll be strong and we can compete. We can win. We can be prosperous because now we can use those resources, because as it stands now, Africa's resources don't benefit African people. They're being extracted. Well, they're actually being stolen by the West for their technology, for their development. And that's by design. So what the West does is create an environment that is conducive to conflict. That's by design. Because if Africans are using those resources, that means that Europeans can't use them. That means that Americans can't use them. They don't want that, right? And the only way that we can stop that and reverse it is that we have to figure out a way to work together. And that's the basic idea behind the Pan-African dream. And so we have to figure out how to get it from a dream to something that looks like reality.
Thank you very much. Now we have to figure out a way to get it from a dream and into reality. Brother Shabazz, what is the greatest challenge that people like you working to bring this dream to pass, what is the greatest challenge you face in seeing that Africans can become united irrespective of nationality or ethnic attachment? What is the greatest challenge?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say the biggest challenge is that we don't believe in ourselves. So the legacy of colonialism, the long shadow of colonialism and now neo-colonialism and miseducation and you know, the fact that, you know, Nigeria is independent, but only by its flag independence, right? Nigeria cannot form a government without loans from the former masters, right? So that's neo-colonial, right? And so many of us, whether you're an African in the United States or an African in Togo, we don't believe in our capacity to do something different. We've been conditioned to be dependent upon our oppressor. And I think so the challenge really is how we see ourselves. We've internalized ideas about ourselves that has convinced us that we are not capable of doing something different. Our current leaders can't imagine this development model or political model that the Europeans have invented, right? Americans talk about democracy, but here in the United States, there's no democracy. The United States imposes itself all over the planet. That's not democratic. They overthrow democratic leaders, they push them out, undermine them all over the world. And so we've internalized this rhetoric about democracy and freedom that's really not about any of those things. And so really, it's really about Africans believing that we can do something different, that this reality that we're in, that we can change our reality. And we can't change that reality by leaving Nigeria across the Sahara or, you know, wherever else, however else we do that. We have to stay at home and figure out a way collectively to, and I guess even to recognize, right, that Africa has everything that we need. If we just took that first understand, if we even had that first step of saying that Africa has everything that we need, how is it that we aren't benefiting from the stuff, from the materials that we have? And then how do we gain control over those resources, over those materials, human and non-human resources? We have everything we need.
Yeah.
And so Pan-Africanism does that, but we have to believe in ourselves. And so that's the biggest challenge, I think, is encouraging Africans to believe that we can change this condition.
Thank you very much. Great answer. We want to apologize again. Time is running, but the discussion is wonderful, and it doesn't seem as if we've taken more than an hour already. I will just apologize, and we'll still take a little of your time, Brother Shabazz. I think that will be okay.
Oh, I got all the time you need, brother.
Thank you.
I'll be here for 3 hours if you want me to.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are grateful.
All right.
Now, let me ask a question in continuation of what we just finished. Now, do you believe also that, I feel leadership matters when we talk about the Pan-African dream to achieve the strength, the kind of leaders we have definitely matters. Now, do you believe in the school of thought that says Africa needs young leaders to champion this dream for us to make the resources of Africa work for Africans? Do you think age in leadership is a factor?
Well, I think one thing, well, there are sort of extremes, right? In the U.S., there's a disregard for age, for elders. There's no respect for elders. So consequently, you know, when you get old in the United States, they send you to a home for old people out of your family, right? And so in Ghana, as far as I know, there's no such home for old people. Old people, elders, stay with the family. Why? Well, part of the reason is that there's a respect, there's a reverence for age in Africa, and that's a good thing. In the U.S., it's the opposite. Age is something you want to avoid. It's something that you don't look forward to. It's something that makes you discardable. you're a throwaway thing if you're old. Something to be forgotten, right? So two opposite ideas about eldership. Now, that can be a good thing, but it can also be negative in the sense that, you know, if you're a young Nigerian with ideas about changing the world, about doing things differently, which Africa needs, you can be blocked by this overemphasis on eldership. And you have some people who, well, to put it bluntly, you have some old fools. They're not elders, they're just old fools. And a system that keeps elders in place, even when they haven't earned their eldership, is bad. And so that's a problem. That's a problem, I would say, in Africa, is that it doesn't encourage young talent to come up and their talents. And so, yes, I would say that young leadership is important in so long as young leadership is in conversation with elders. So it's not an either or. It should be the elders grooming younger people and then getting out of the way, getting in the background, and being an advisor to the young people coming up. And that's, I would say, in a nutshell, well, not part of the problem in Nigeria and in Africa generally is that that's not happening, right? You have elders who want to stay in power forever. And that's detrimental to development and progress. So yeah, I would say I generally would agree with that, but I would just add the caveat that it has to be in conversation with the elders because the elders have experience. You might have good ideas, but you have no experience, right? And so you have to bring those two together. If you bring those two together, you have a dynamic leadership that is productive and progressive.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's great. Now let's go back to books and reading. Now everybody can see at your back, there is a very nice shelf of books, you know, heap of books. And now, what can you tell us about the discipline of storing books and preserving books? How do you achieve that? Personally, for me, there are some books I read in school, some books I bought previously that maybe for one or two reasons I never cared enough. And today I don't have those books as a part of my library. So how did you do that? Yeah, what must a reader, how can a reader be able to preserve book and take good care of their books and have great bookshelf like you do?
Oh, great question. Well, one advantage that Nigerians have that I don't have here is that you can go to the next corner and find someone who will build you a shelf, and you know, the next day, hey, I want a bookshelf with 5 levels on it, this wide, this tall, and you come back in a week and, you know, it's done. You have a beautiful handmade bookshelf. Am I right? Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you can't do that in the U.S. Or it'd be very difficult to do in the U.S. And so part of it is you have the resources there. So the bookshelf was not really a problem. Then the other problem is really storage space. You know, that's a challenge. Like, for example, I'm in my basement now, and for a long time, because when I saw this space, I said there was no room to put all the books up. And then it occurred to me that, well, let's see, can I show you? Let me show you, maybe you get a look. What I figured out is that I can make a middle row in my basement. Now, the middle row makes it very tight. So when you come around here, see, there's a, oh, let's see. Yeah. See, so I put a middle row of bookshelves there, and that solved the problem. And so part of it is about, you know, working with your space. And, you know, I have books all up here, they're everywhere. But it's about, you know, part of it is about being economical, and sometimes you're gonna have to stack books. Sometimes you're gonna have, you know, bookshelves that fit in corners. I also have a table here in front of me, right? So this table is designed really to hold books. I don't know what it was made for, but I figured, I saw this table at a used book place, or not, a used store, and I said this would be a good foundation for for books. And so that's part of it, is figuring out how to arrange the furniture and the space you have to accommodate your books. What else? Let's see. Lighting, you know, you want to have good lighting so you can read. That's important. And then now in Nigeria, you don't have a lot of used bookstores, right? Well, how do you tell me? Do you have? Are there lots of bookstores in? Are you in Lagos?
No, I'm in Benin.
Okay, in Benin, are there lots of bookstores in Benin, or are there any?
Yeah, the bookstores. Yeah, a lot.
And what kind of books do they sell there?
Yeah, you know, we have new books mostly, and then there are also old books. You know, you go to just that is in the central area, and then where you have a lot of collections of these booksellers and bookstores that are located. Yeah.
Right. So if you're in a city, you'll have access to bookstores, and I guess if you're in a village, you'd have to go to the city to get that access. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't find a bookstore in the village, right?
No.
Yeah. So part of it is about location, and then I would say too, part of it is financial, right? Do you have the funds to collect books? That's a challenge.
Yeah.
Now, I don't have the answer for that for Nigerians. Maybe, you know, part of it could be maybe perhaps pooling your resources together to collect books. Part of it could be, I'm not really sure about other strategies, but you know, you have to figure that out. If you have limited funds, then how do you fund that thing that you're passionate about? You know, that's going to be a challenge. What else? Now the other thing too, you know, I probably have like 1,000 electronic books, and so one thing about this generation too is that people aren't doing physical books or they're doing more stuff online than physical. But you know, having said that, you know, feel of a physical book, and I don't know, maybe for younger people, that's not such a big deal. But for me, you know, I like to finger and touch, even the smell, all part of the experience for me. Yeah. So I do read stuff online. I have lots of stuff online, but I tend to favor, you know, physical books. If I have a choice between an electronic book and a physical book, I would get the physical book. But one option could be, you know, if you don't have a lot of space, and oftentimes the electronic books are cheaper, even free. You know, one option would be would be electronic books. So maybe a combination of the two. So, yeah. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah, thank you very much. That's great recommendations. Now, somebody.
I was going to mention one more thing too. Yeah. One more thing too. I remember when I was at the University of Ghana. So a book like this, for example, the binding is coming. Can you see the book?
Yeah.
Yeah, the binding is loose. And one thing I discovered in Ghana, well, number one, the university has a great bookstore. University of Ghana, great bookstore. That's probably still bookstores. But they also have book binders. And so whenever I travel to Ghana, I take the books that are in the worst condition, if the covers are falling off, if the binders are loose, I'll take those to Ghana and get them rebound for, you know, really not very expensive at all. And so in terms of maintaining your books, you could be aware of that too. Find out if they have, you know, book binders. I'm sure they do in Nigeria, book binders that can repair. And I've gotten lots of books repaired in Ghana that way. So that's another thing in terms of maintenance that you can look into too, because you can't do that easily in the United States. So there are some things that as a Nigerian, you actually have an advantage. I can't go here anywhere in the US conveniently and have someone buy my books. It'd be very difficult. But in Nigeria, you could do that pretty easily and very cheaply.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Our time is fast spent. We'll just take 2 more questions Three more questions. One is from Dabale. He says, how many books do you have? Do you still have an idea of your book collection?
I have no idea. I was thinking about that a few days ago. Yeah, I really don't. I'll have to get back to her on that one. I don't know. Yeah, I couldn't even guess.
Yeah, that is great.
And I will say that, you know, I will say that for Black scholars, you know, they're like my mentor here in this area where I live. He has probably has 4 times as many books as I have. And there are Black scholars who have a much, you know, this library is really small compared to other libraries. Well, it's not small, but it's, I would say, medium sized. So there's that. But yeah, it's a lot of books for sure. I don't know the number. I'll have to maybe try to estimate and get back to you on that one. I have no idea.
Okay, thanks. There's another question coming in from Africana. He says, Brother Shabazz was once a Marine, and I can only but imagine the tight schedule while serving. Could you please share how he maintained his reading habit during his busy days? You know, very busy.
Okay. Well, yeah, thank you for that question. And I will stress too that really my book collection started with the seed of an idea planted in the Marine Corps, you know, about revolution, which seems, you know, counterintuitive because you join the military supposedly to be, you know, patriotic and fight for your country. But I was learning the opposite, that my country is the problem. And in fact, you know, that was the same thing, you know, for Nigerians and Ghanaians, etc. They were fighting in World War II, right? And then in fighting in Europe, them colonized back home. And so these Africans were coming back from the war front, coming home, in Ghana or Nigeria or Togo. So Africans coming back from the war front were a very important catalyst for the anti-colonial movement in Africa. And so likewise for me, you know, the same thing. I became very radical, and so my book collection, or the desire to have books that were Black conscious, that were Pan-African, that were rooted in my experience and my heritage, started in the Marine Corps. Now, to answer the question, if you're in boot camp, which is like for, I forgot now how I think it's for like 3 months or something like that. Boot camp is where you start. Boot camp is very regimented. You're really fine. Once you get out of boot camp, then you know you're only working it's like regular hours from, I don't know, I guess we got up at 6, and then you're finished by maybe 6, and then the rest of the day is yours. And so I would fill the rest of my day with, you know, these meetings. We would meet every other week. So I started this group in Japan called the African American Historical Society Study Group, and we would meet every 2 weeks and talk about books. I would go to the library and get maybe 12 books and put the books on my bed, line them up on my bed, and we just talk about books for an hour, and that would be it. And so really, the time management was not that difficult because we had a pretty set schedule once you got out of boot camp. You'd be up at 6, you're finished by 5 or 6 with your job, and then, you know, the rest of the day is pretty much yours. Now, whereas, in fact, I was just talking to someone, a friend of mine, who was in the military at the same time I was, and when he had time off, oftentimes he went to clubs, right? I didn't go to clubs. I don't drink. I don't go to clubs. And so I would spend that time, you know, reading or organizing. And so that's another part of it too, is I had lots of time because I wasn't doing other things. A lot of the guys were going out to clubs and partying, and I was in my room reading or writing or organizing. And so that's another part of it too, is that I just was very focused on that one thing and things related to that one thing. And so I really had lots of time.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Brother Shabazz, is there a collection of your ideas, of your initiatives? Is there a collection in the form of a book or something that readers can actually get to pick up and digest?
No, you know that. So I'm a teacher. I teach, but my teaching, well, see, for some professors, their focus is there are two tracks. One track is research and writing, and so you devote a lot of time to writing and research. Another thing, I've been more on the teaching track than the writing research track, so I haven't written much actually. Well, can I say this? I'll say that, you know, as an activist, I'll say that, how can I say this? Well, people have written a lot of, I'll just say that, yeah, the people who don't like activists write it. And so the short answer is no, you cannot. And that's, and what I'm getting at is that as an activist, sometimes it's good not to have a lot of stuff written down, but even then, if people want to know, they'll find out. I'm speaking in code right now, but the short answer is no. And because the answer is no, because I've been really focused more on teaching than writing.
Okay.
I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. We hope that sometime in the future we'll get to have something from Brother Shabazz that can go around, and then as regard the Pan-African Dreamer movement. So lastly,
you know what, brother, we have. Let me just say though, we have so much that is written. We already have the blueprints.
Yeah.
You know, it needs to be said. Really, I think, my own personal opinion, everything that we need to do what we need to do has already been written. It's really for us to say that we're going to do it.
All right.
Yeah. So I've always kind of said, do we really need someone else to say what's already been said? What else? If I'm going to write, am I going to write something that's different or original, that somehow adds to the knowledge that we have? And I really kind of feel like, you know, that it's really already been written. You know, Kwame Nkrumah gave us a blueprint. Africa must unite. Neocolonialism, the last age of imperialism. Malcolm X has written, you know, he has this wonderful autobiography, Kwame Ture. So all the writing is there. We just have to execute. And I think that's really up on us. So we can point to the leaders and say, the leaders are our problem. But the leaders only make up, that's like not even 1% of the population, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, the leaders are a problem, but they're only a problem if we allow them to be a problem. The people have the power, but we don't know we have power. And so until we as a people recognize our aims of politics, to challenge our leaders, to make our leaders live up to their responsibilities, we'll be stuck in this rut that we're in. And so all that to say is I'm sure I'll write something, but I'm not convinced that I really need to write, because it's all been said. We just need to execute.
Okay, thank you very much. I love that part. We need to execute. Now, we'll wrap it up at this time. Somebody has said we need access to those books in Nigeria and other parts of the African world. So, Brother Shabazz, what you do for us is, as a community, would appreciate if you can give us a list of those books about Pan-Africanism that you want our readers to look into, so that as we plan for our next year schedule, we can put those books in. Like this year, come March, we are going to be reading How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And I think that's one great book about the Center for African Liberation. So we would appreciate from you a collection, a list of books that you know would make us better African citizens and look forward to that Pan-African dream. Would that be possible?
Yes, I have that. I have an electronic version of Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me just say too, it's been a pleasure to talk to my brothers and sisters in Nigeria, to interact with you all, and anytime that you reach out to me, I'll find a way for us to connect, because it's really important that we have these conversations, that we link up, that we share ideas, that we dialogue, to figure out, how to solve our problems.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing. I love I love your project. I love y'all's that project that you're doing there, encouraging reading. And I'll support it in any way that I can. Oh, I also want to say, lastly, for those people who got the answer right, the answer to that question I asked is that Malcolm X was named Omawali.
Yeah.
So I'm relying on you, brother, to figure out who the winners are and get their information, their mailing information, so we can figure out how to send those 2 books to the winners.
Thank you very much. We are grateful for that kind gesture. Thank you very much. We're grateful. So finally, as we wrap up, I just want to ask any other word of advice for us as readers as we continue on that path from you.
Yeah, my best advice really is, I'll just reiterate, follow your passion and don't allow others to determine what your path is. You have a special gift inside of you that was given to you by Oludumare, or whoever you call God, right? And that thing inside of you is just begging to get out. It's bursting to get out. It's fighting to get out. Let that thing be released, and follow that thing. And your reading will be informed by that thing that you're following. So be passionate, be open to experiencing new things. That's another important part of it too. Don't be afraid to try new things, and everything else will fall into place.
Thank you very, very much. We are very grateful. We are very grateful for your time and for for the way you agreed to serve us. It was without stress. You agreed to be with us, and here you are. You've enlightened us a lot, and everyone from ReadbookNG, we are grateful. We wish you the best, that you will continue to succeed in your mission and your vision to bring light and liberation to Africa. As a community, we'll also be here anytime to welcome you to Nigeria. When you are ready to come, just call on us and we'll be here to host you and to welcome you and to help you also succeed in your project anytime it's ready to come to Nigeria. So thank you very much. Members of I would want you to just, anybody, if you want to say hi and a word of appreciation to Brother Shabazz, please, you are free to do that. You can unmute and say something. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm sorry. I want you to unmute and say it. Yeah, we are using the chat function, but can we just unmute and let Brother Shabazz hear our voices? Thank you, please, please.
Thanks, Brother Shabazz.
I'm collecting 400. Now I'm collecting 400.
Thanks, Brother Shabazz. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Brother Shabazz. Really appreciate. It's actually been a very, very enlightening period with you. I really gained a lot, and I hope when we beckon next, we can always get to learn more from you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Brother Shabazz. At this time, we'll call it a day, and we hope to have you again with us some other time. Okay, Brother Shabazz, okay. Okay, goodbye, everybody. Thank you.